This comparison video is sponsored by Stryd. They are providing us with these foot pods that allow us to collect a ton of data when running in shoes and comparing them. More on that here in a second in the data part of this video. Hey everyone, welcome back on channel. My name is Alex. In today's video, we are comparing two race day shoes that are releasing in 2025, the Adidas Adios Pro 4, which we'll call the Adios Pro 4, and the Nike Vaporfly 4, which we'll call the Vaporfly 4. Both shoes are either just released, that's the Adios Pro 4, available in a few colorways, €250, $250. The Vaporfly is about to release. It released in a few select regions early March around the Tokyo Marathon, and it will release more globally in April. First of all, let's quickly look at the specs. We have 39.5mm of stack height in the heel, 6mm drop for that 33.5 in the forefoot on the Adios Pro 4. In my size US 11, this shoe comes at 225 grams, which is already a good weight. The Vaporfly 4 comes at 35mm in the heel, 6mm drop as well for that 29 in the forefoot. So both shoes are 6mm drop, but they are not the same stack height in the heel. There's more foam in the Adios Pro 4 heel, and we'll see whether or not that has an impact on the ride. The weight of the Vaporfly 4 is also quite impressive, coming at 189 grams in my size US 11 EU45, which is really lightweight for a race day shoe. Just as a comparison element, the Vaporfly Next Percent 1, so 3 versions before this shoe, was 217 grams in my size US 11. So Nike succeeded in shaving off 28 grams or about an ounce of weight in between the first version of the Next Percent and the fourth iteration of this shoe. Like I said, the Vaporfly 4 will release here in a few weeks. The price point is not known yet, but most likely in that €260–270 ballpark, just like its predecessor, the Vaporfly 3. With the specs out of the way, let's quickly look into the fit of these two shoes, and that's a huge element of difference between these two. On the Adios Pro 4, you have that light lock upper, very pliable, as you can see, really pliable. The heel also is quite pliable, and to be honest, this shoe offers a ton of comfort. The fit is true to size, meaning that you can buy the same size as you would for other running shoes. For Adidas specifically, this means that it's running a bit more normal compared to the Adios Pro 3, Adios Pro 2. These shoes were always on the, let's say, longer side of things. This one is a much more true to size fit, and it's a very comfortable shoe. I didn't like the upper end, the fit, the comfort even of the Adios Pro 3, the predecessor of the shoe. This one really addressed all the concerns I had with the fit and the upper. Great upper material, great lockdown in the heel, great midfoot lockdown, just perfect for any racing distance. I have my marathon PB in this shoe, and I think this says a lot when it comes to the distances this shoe can handle. Anything from the 5K to the marathon, at least in terms of comfort, for sure. The Vaporfly comes with a different approach. The upper is a bit more structured, surprisingly. It holds in place a bit better. It is also a bit lighter, meaning that the material is more breathable. There's a bit more of that see-through effect here. It feels a bit more plasticky when the Adios Pro 4 feels a bit more silky, almost a bit more soft against my hand, also against my feet. When running in these two shoes, this upper doesn't feel as comfortable, but the biggest issue with this upper is definitely here around the tongue and heel area, where Nike didn't succeed at providing a good enough lockdown. My heel was moving around, and when I decided to go with a runner's knot to kind of secure a bit better the lockdown here in this area, I ended up having lots of issues with pressure, lacing pressure coming on top of my foot, of my instep here, making it a very, and I insist on the very because this is not something I'm saying very often, a very unpleasant experience when it comes to the fit and the comfort of this shoe. Is this a deal breaker or not? Let's figure out when looking at the midsole. And for that, we will get some stats here on your screen. But before that, just let's describe the two midsoles. We have Stryd Pro, a very soft version here in this shoe. ZoomX, let's say a more dense version compared to V3 here on this shoe. Both foams are supercritical foams. This is a TPEE foam, supercritical foam, and this is a Pebax supercritical foam. Does it have an impact? We'll see in the data. Both shoes have some sort of stiffening element. We have a fly plate that you you can see through this cutout here in the outsole on the Vaporfly. We have some energy rods, carbon energy rods that you can also see through this midsole cutout here on the Adios Pro 4. So both shoes come with a supercritical foam and a stiffening element, which make them kind of on par. However, again, like I said in the specs, the Adios Pro 4 has more stack height, both in the heel and in the forefoot, less so in the Vaporfly. Let's describe the ride here in a second, but before that, I will get some Stryd data on your screen, and that's super interesting. Stryd, like I said, is the sponsor of this video, and it allows us to have really specific metrics when it comes to these two shoes and to be able to compare them. So for this comparison video, I ran a 2x5K session in these shoes, meaning that I ran 5K with the Adios Pro 4 and then 5K with the Vaporfly 4. There is a small testing bias because I did run on fresher legs with the Adios Pro 4 and on slightly more tired legs on the Vaporfly 4. Ideally, you would want to do ABBA or ABAB, depending on what type of testing you're conducting. I do believe that the testing conditions are still relevant, but this was also a disclaimer to be super transparent in how we are providing with the numbers that you will see here on your screen. First of all, let's start with the footpath comparison, allowing us to see exactly how my feet were moving in 3D when I was running with these two shoes. This should allow us to see if I had a bit more dispersion in terms of movement with one of the two shoes. Here for this very specific graph, we have a dot line for the Adios Pro 4 and a solid line for the Vaporfly 4. As you can see, interestingly, it looks like my back kick was a bit less high with the Adios Pro 4, and I was swinging my leg a bit more with the Vaporfly. Does it have an impact on efficiency? Interestingly, I think this is correlated with what I believe is the most efficient shoe out of the two. We'll come back to that here in a second. When it comes to lateral dispersion of how much my feet were going, outwards, inwards, the two shoes are fairly condensed. That's my running style. One of the two seems to be a bit more condensed, and that's again the Adios Pro 4. It seems like I'm a bit more aligned also when it comes to how my gait cycle was going for these two shoes. I feel like when I look at this from the top, which I'm doing right now, the two are actually quite similar, to be honest with you. But again, it feels like with the Adios Pro 4, I have less of a back kick, but I go a bit further. Like in my stance, I kind of extend my leg a bit more, but I go less so backwards. Now with the footpath visualization out of the way, let's look into some numbers. So distance, like I said, 5K with the two shoes. Most importantly, the power output with the two shoes for the 5 km stretch is exactly the same, 331 watts. So that's the amount of power generated by me to move forward. There's a few components in power. There's the horizontal power, vertical power, the air resistance, and all of that combined is this number, 331 watts. This is, just for your knowledge as well, slightly below my power threshold, meaning that this would be probably around a half marathon type of effort for me when it comes to the power output. Now with the exact same power output, let's check the paces. I was a bit faster in the Vaporfly 4, 337 minutes per kilometer, that's 548 minutes per mile. And I was slightly slower with the Adios Pro 4, 339 minutes per kilometer, that's 552, 53 minutes per mile, so slightly below 6 minutes per mile pace in both shoes. Is that relevant? Does it mean that the Vaporfly is more efficient? It's possible. To be honest, the wind was a bit changing, it was turning. I didn't have a clear headwind or a clear backwind in either of the two shoes. If I were to be very specific in what I felt, I think the 5 km stretch was going slightly uphill in the Vaporfly, but we're talking the grade here is 0.1% and elevation gain is 9 meters with the Vaporfly, and maybe a touch more backwind in the shoe. The elevation was maybe slightly negative, but with a bit more headwind in the shoe. But to be honest, I think we're looking at very good testing conditions, and I'm fairly confident that yes, the Vaporfly is slightly more efficient, 2 seconds per kilometer, which over the course of a marathon ends up being quite some time. So yeah, the Vaporfly is slightly more efficient, at least based on the same power output and the two paces compared here. But let's go a bit deeper here. We have, first of all, cadence. Cadence is the number of steps per minute. Does it mean anything? It can have a meaning, but just looking at the numbers here, 171 steps per minute in both shoes, meaning that the two shoes kind of requested me to provide with the same cadence to create a given power output. Does this mean something? To be honest, I think cadence needs just to be checked but doesn't have a huge meaning. I'm just sharing it with you. Interestingly, it's the same number, but even with a small difference, I don't think this would have been a huge deal breaker in between the two shoes. Form power, that's the amount of power that you are generating vertically, meaning that form power is essentially how much power goes wasted, quote unquote, because it's not wasted at all, but how much power is put into your form, so into your vertical oscillation in a sense. The lower the form power, the better, because it means that you're wasting less energy to move vertically. These two shoes have almost the same number, 76 watts for the Vaporfly, 75 for the Adios Pro. Let's call it the same number. To be honest, there's a 1 watt difference. Yes, it is something, and again, over the course of a marathon, it can make a difference, meaning that maybe the Vaporfly was a bit more bouncy and pushing me a bit more vertically. We can confirm that here in a second with vertical oscillation. 874 centimeters of vertical oscillation, meaning the displacement of a certain level of my body. Let's take the hips, for instance. It's the displacement in centimeters. For each step, I was going 874 up and 874 down. That's the average, of course. And in the Adios Pro 4, we're looking at 868. So there's a 0.06 centimeter difference between the two shoes, which correlates with foam power. I was bouncing a bit more in the Vaporfly, probably pushing also a bit more and kind of going upwards a bit more, if that makes sense. But still, the pace was faster in the Vaporfly, so more efficient, but with a bit more vertical oscillation. That's what we can deduct from these numbers. Let's look at LSS, leg spring stiffness, which is essentially the ability of legs to store and release energy. You can compare a leg to one of your legs, or the two legs actually, to a rubber band that you are kind of stretching. It stores energy and then it releases it. This is the same for legs. The higher the number of LSS, the better, because it means that your legs are offered or are given the ability to store more energy with a given shoe. So we're looking at a higher number here as kind of the better metric. With the Vaporfly, I had 10.3 kilonewtons per meter of leg spring stiffness, meaning again, more energy stored and released by my legs with this shoe, whereas I had 10.0 kilonewton per meters with the Adios Pro 4. So as a takeaway from this, we can say that the Vaporfly probably allows one person to store and release more energy with their legs. So yeah, technically better as well here. Ground contact time can be a good proxy metric for responsiveness. The lower the ground contact time, the more responsive a shoe is. And here, again, very interestingly, the number is exactly the same, 198 milliseconds for both shoes, meaning that I was spending the exact same time in contact with the ground at each step, let's say 1/5 of a second here with the two shoes. None of them is more responsive. I would have said, based on my feelings, that the Vaporfly was a bit more responsive. It appears that it isn't. And last but not least, again, very similar metric, but impact loading rate. This is essentially how much impact your lower legs and body in general is taking, sustaining at each second. This is a good metric also to understand if one shoe is maybe super efficient, but so close to the ground and creates so much pounding that you are maybe prone to higher injury risk because of the shoe creating that whole loading on your body at each impact. Here the number is the same, almost the same, 81 for the Vaporfly and 82 for the Adios Pro 4. No deduction here, so the two shoes technically are protecting you in the same fashion, which is also super interesting because, like I said many times, the Vaporfly is closer to the ground. It has 4 less millimeters of stack height in the heel. My feeling was that the Adios Pro is more protective. It creates less impact, let's say, at each step, but apparently it is not the case. Let's look at a general takeaway from all these metrics and combine it with the ride feelings that I have with the two shoes. I feel like the Vaporfly indeed is maybe a bit more efficient. It feels more direct, more responsive, more energetic. The LSS metric, the leg spring stiffness metric, correlates to what I feel with this shoe. I feel like my legs are storing and releasing more energy. I feel like this shoe is creating that very direct connection with the ground, super zesty, quite aggressive, and probably a good choice for shorter distances. Also with the very high weight savings that Nike managed, this shoe feels like you're wearing nothing on your feet, and it feels, again, super nimble to have it with you. It feels more efficient. With the same amount of power, I was a bit faster in it. There is no question about it. It's the numbers. The Adios Pro 4 feels more protective. It is much softer. It is maybe slightly more stable. The base net width is a bit larger, a bit wider here on the Adios Pro 4. The Vaporfly feels like a wild animal. It's a bit more narrow, and I think most people will pronate more in this shoe. Coming back to the Adios Pro 4, it feels a bit softer, it feels more protective. Maybe it feels less efficient, but it also feels much more suited for longer distances like the half marathon, the marathon. Apparently, you're not losing that much more energy or that much time when it comes to the Adios Pro 4, meaning that yes, it has a softer foam, yes, it is not as efficient as the Vaporfly, and that correlates with my feelings. That's not just the numbers here. I really believe that the Adios Pro 4 is a better shoe for longer distances just because it offers more protection. You're not losing that much efficiency in the process. However, and that's where I think it's gonna be my kind of verdict in between the two shoes, there is a huge deal breaker in between the two. The Vaporfly is just not a comfortable shoe. It feels like a shoe that doesn't want to be friends with your feet, ankles, and for that reason, and that reason only, I would rule it out of most race day shoe choices. Would I race in it? Maybe I would give it a shot for a 5K just for the sake of it and like saying, hey, I raced in the Vaporfly 4 and I can have a honest race day opinion about the shoe. But it's just so uncomfortable for me with the lacing pressure, all the movement, heel slippage, that I would go with the Adios Pro 4 for any distance, every time. And that's even keeping in mind that I was slightly faster in this shoe and that I would maybe technically sacrifice a few seconds over the course of a 5K, maybe a few minutes in the Adios Pro 4, but comfort for me is more important. I think I would not finish a marathon in the Vaporfly. So yeah, that's the comparison here between the two shoes. Numbers are one thing, and Stryd did a great job at providing with a very clear comparison between the two shoes. Very few differences, which I think is also interesting as a takeaway. But then the key element remains comfort, fit, personal, feelings, personal sensations, most importantly, between the two shoes. And tested on dry conditions, I cannot comment on the outsole. I know that the Adios Pro 4 performs well with that light traction and continental combo. I feel like the durability and the traction should also be good on the Vaporfly, with a caveat because there's quite some ZoomX exposed here in the midfoot section. But yeah, this outsole and grip and traction do not really come into play here in this comparison and in this assessment that I made. I'm going with the Adios Pro 4. There's a clear winner, and I think it's really good to say it out loud. Hopefully this is going to be helpful for you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks to Stryd for sponsoring this video. And let's link to another comparison. We have the Adios Pro 4 versus the Evo 1 right here. Thanks for watching.